Welcome to episode 4 of Connecting Hope. My name is Mark Jones, Chief Communications Officer for the Mississippi Department of Human Services. In today's episode, we will be continuing our conversation about childcare in Mississippi. In episode 3, Dr. Chad Allgood and I discussed the funding mechanisms and programs provided by the Mississippi Department of Human Services Division of Early Childhood Care and Development. We discussed how recurring and one-time funding sources have been utilized to support child care providers, parents, and especially Mississippi's youngest in their work to prepare them for lifelong learning. MDHS is a proud partner in supporting the workforce of today while preparing the workforce of tomorrow through affordable and quality child care. In today's episode, we will be digging deeper into the importance of partnerships and collaboratives with the child care industry to address the challenges faced by the industry. Today, we are joined by 3 providers who work daily on the front lines as child care center owners and advocates for Mississippi's youngest. It's an honor to welcome Licia Daniel from Funtime Preschool in Clinton, Debbie Ellis, advocate and owner of the Learning Tree, and Susie M. Brooks Child Care Center in Greenwood, Mississippi, in the heart of the Delta, as well as Jennifer Calvert from Calvert's ABC Preschool and Nursery in Aberdeen, and a member of the State Early Childhood Care and Advisory Committee. So we're representing 3 large swaths of the state today. And it's great to welcome Dr. Chad Allgood, who coordinates child care for MDHS across the state of Mississippi. So welcome, and let's start by sharing a little more from each of our guests, starting with you, Debbie. Tell us about your programs and your background and why childcare was chosen as your career.
Well, I at a very early age 3, I was privileged to be able to attend an exclusive nursery school in Louisiana. It's one of my fondest childhood memories, and I always knew that that was something that I would like to do. I'm from a long line of educators. Although my father was an engineer, my mother was self-employed. They didn't want me to starve to death, but they did finally board and support me as an educator. And I majored in elementary education with an emphasis in early childhood because I knew that this was something that I always wanted to do. So I do have that background, and now I'm going to tell you how old I am. 38 years experience in childcare. The Learning Tree opened January 6, 1986.
And you're in an important area of the state too. Are you a native of Greenwood?
No, I'm not a native, but I was raised here. I attended all from age 5. I started first grade at age 5, and I all the way through high school in Greenwood. So I've lived here most of my life.
It's an important area for us to focus and talk about childcare today. The Delta.
Yes, childcare is it provides a platform to correct and address so many of the ills that we live with daily here in the Mississippi Delta.
Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from your expertise and your knowledge and your background. Let's move over to Licia and talk a little bit about childcare, because I'll be honest, growing up in Central Mississippi, I'm used to the Funtime name on something else, but I also know the reputation that you have in Central Mississippi as an advocate and supporter of childcare. Licia, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. My backstory is a little more unconventional than Debbie's because growing up working in our small business, Funtime Skateland, is kind of how we got started in expanding and adding childcare to our programming when our parents were kind of getting ready to retire. I did teach public school for 10 years and loved every minute of it, but I find even more satisfaction in what I'm doing now, with my primary focus being on birth to 5, and knowing the research behind the brain development that occurs birth to 3, birth to 5, and the critical years. And like Debbie said, we have so much opportunity to change the trajectory of children's lives because of the number of hours per day they spend with us.
And being in the metro area, and we'll hit on this in a little bit, those issues that you may face as a provider are going to be different than what Debbie may face in the Delta, as well as what Jennifer may experience up in Northeast Mississippi, up in Aberdeen. So I'm excited to kind of let people see that there are pieces in an urban area versus rural or other components of the state that may come into play as we support childcare. And so, Jennifer, I'll ask you, why did you choose childcare? We all love children, right? But it's a challenging industry.
Well, that's true. We all love children, but mine's is a little different. Childcare chose me. When I actually worked for a janitorial company that had the childcare site, and I was the bookkeeper for both the janitorial and the childcare. So the childcare part of it, they decided to sell and get out of it. So I inherited kind of. So I took over. So childcare found me, and I have loved every moment of it ever since I've been in it. And I guess that was my call. That's what God wanted for me, was the childcare and not the bookkeeping part of it, because I was supposed to be an accountant, not in the childcare field. But I love working with my children and preparing them and giving them the quality atmosphere, the nurturing environment, that they need to get to the point where they need to be. Like I say,
let's get into it. Jennifer, you saw a need. Licia, you kind of averted in the middle of a career. And Debbie, you started from almost an early age yourself. Chad, jumping here. Y'all bring a depth of background. Chad talked about his background of getting into childcare almost by accident as well. And the beauty of here is there's three different perspectives. So we'll start with you, Jennifer. What are you seeing as the state of childcare in the state of Mississippi? And we want to get to the brass tacks. We want to get down to what are not only the issues facing it, but also where we are sitting today and where we need to go. So okay. Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think it's good right now. I mean, I've been in it like over 33 years. We have good things that's been coming down the pipe from Chad's office and everything. And I feel like if we can just continue to move forward with the support from, DHS and also with support from the state. It's awesome with the funding that they have, been able to give to these centers for incentives with the staff. Also the incentives as far as refreshing the classroom. All of that was, was needed, and it's been awesome. And I just hope that in some way and somehow that the state would take part or somehow or another help continue some of this funding to keep us, I guess, from the standpoint, the staff ratio, the staff turnover, so that we can maintain our staff and continue to move forward. Because the money that, childcare is expensive, but you have to look in the area that you're in. Sometimes, you just have to do the best you can do. But any little extra that's been given, I have truly appreciated. I thank Chad and his office and the state, because this has really benefited my childcare site.
So I'm going to bring in Chad there. We heard Jennifer talk a little bit about the staffing levels and even the training component and quality support piece. You and I talked in the first episode about how that is federally mandated, that quality support, but also what the division itself is doing to even take that to a higher level. What happens if we ignore, Chad? What happens if we ignore that quality support and keeping centers open with staff?
Again, when we have conversations about providing the best possible care and education for children, you got have to have a conversation about, do we have skilled, knowledgeable teachers that can work with children? The key of providing high quality care and education for children, it rests with the relationships of the adults, the teachers, the directors, bus drivers, the cooks, everybody that works in an early childhood program, their interactions with children, that makes the difference between whether or not that child is getting high quality early childhood education. And so we can't, I think the question is, can we afford not to invest in those people that are working with our children? And I think the clear answer to that is no, we cannot afford to not invest in our teachers. And unfortunately, that's something that not just Mississippi, but our entire nation has not done a great job of in years past. It is actually supporting these teachers. And that's exactly what they are. They are teachers. Some people call them caregivers, some people can call them whatever, but at the end of the day, they are educators. They are caring for these children, absolutely, but there is so much learning. If you were to just go spend an hour in an early childhood classroom, regardless of what age group it was, you can be astounded at how much learning is happening and how fast it's learning. Our kiddos, their little brains are moving so quickly. They are learning new things every single day. And it's critical that we support those folks that are working every single day to educate those kids.
So let's go to Lisa and Debbie. Let's start with this topic, and then I'm going to let y'all throw a few other issues you may be facing, because it seems like, looking at your body language and your head nods, that no matter what part of the state you are in, a well-trained workforce, what happens when you don't have a childcare provider or a teacher show up? Do you have to turn a child away for the day because there are guidelines on how many children per worker, or it affects your ability to provide a quality educational experience to Mississippi's youngest children? So let's go deeper into this topic, because I think a lot of people, we're not back to where we're just babysitting somebody. We're developing, as Chad said, minds, bodies, and hearts for receptive lifelong learning. So we'll start. Just raise your hand and start talking, whoever.
Absolutely. I think one of the most critical pieces for us is having the capacity to provide care at all costs for our families to be able to go to work. So that's one very important component. The other very important component is the quality of the care that the children are receiving. And when we have staff who are not qualified, or who don't come to work, or they are sick, or they have situations they have to deal with, we have to be very resourceful in how we manage that and how we navigate, so that we stay in compliance with all the regulations that are on us from the health department, just operational standards. So Wednesday, we had a teacher who had bronchitis and could not come into work. And so I did not want to turn those children away and say, you can't come to school today. But what I had to do was move children around to other classrooms, which is not best practice for those children. But at the end of the day, we couldn't be out of ratio. So you have to decide where your priorities are and what you can address with what you're given on any given day.
So Debbie, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper, because in the Delta, MDHS, through our child care payment program, serves low-income working families, working parents. Debbie, you are in one of the most historically impoverished areas. How does the lack of availability of a trained or available workforce on any one given day have exponential impact upon low-income families, specifically in your area?
Oh, it's tremendous. Failure to have a well-trained the childcare workforce is just tremendous with regard to impact. I would like to speak to what I see as the state of childcare, not
Yes.
just in Mississippi today, but also across the nation. It is a failed industry. Childcare does not work in the private sector model. What we have done over the years is Licia developed her program from skating to caring for those parents when children were out of school to developing a wonderful early learning program. Same with Jennifer. Jennifer's program was developed alongside the janitorial service, and she took that program, and I know she's participated in class and has a quality rating. She's done a beautiful job. When I opened my program, I did not serve low income children, and they could not come to my program because I was the most expensive in Greenwood, Mississippi. I was more expensive than the private school. The private school used to contact me each year to see if I had up on my rates in order to determine whether or not they could go up on their rates. This is just how the industry has worked. But we are extremely, extremely fractured as an industry. We have family child care homes, we have center-based homes, we have licensed care, we have unlicensed care, we have Department of Licensing, then we have the Department of Human Services. We follow two sets of policies and regulations.
Yeah.
And I tell you what happened when the pandemic hit. This is such a quiet industry, but we have all of a sudden realized when the pandemic hit, where is the infrastructure needed to care for these children while these necessary people report to work, because the child care facilities closed, many of them, many of them, more than to my liking, but many closed. The school systems closed. There was no place for these children to go but for licensed programs that were operating. Fortunately, Chad's program stepped in and set up emergency child care programs in areas that had that need. But that's when people realized, gosh, we never realized how dependent we are on child. We can't go to work. We can't operate the hospital. We can't operate the fast food services without our employees, and they can't come to work because their child care programs and school systems are closed. And that's when we really, really realize how fractured we are. We've always known that the money's not there. We've always known that. It's really a bipartisan issue.
Yes.
In 2018, President Donald Trump, through the work of his daughter Ivanka, doubled the amount of the Child Care Development Fund because he listened to advisors and the Wall Street Journal that talked about how crucial child care was to workforce development. He did that. He was the first to do that. Let me tell you something. When that pandemic hit, let me tell you who thrived. Not the exclusive, affluent programs, because those parents withdrew their children and they could not collect when the children were not present. The ones who thrived were the ones who had the support of the Child Care Development Fund through the Mississippi Department of Human Services. We were the ones that could hold strong because we had that federal and state support. So now we know what is needed to ensure that childcare is a stable industry. We must have those financial supports.
You brought up the word fractured, and as an outsider coming into MDHS, I've had a 3-year learning curve, and Dr. Allgood and his team have done a great job helping me slowly grasp that and seeing that there's so many layers of monitoring and governance within it. I used to think, oh, just the health department handles the licensure part. I did not know that MDHS it took probably what, 3 months, Dr. Allgood, for me to learn the difference between the Child Care Development Fund and MDHS Quality Supports and the Department of Health. And that's just a misnomer, and it's a lack of awareness, even among policymakers, even among those who are sitting at the federal and state level. And that's why I'm glad we're here today to talk about that. And Dr. Allgood, you mentioned in our previous episode a little bit about Child Care Strong, and Debbie has mentioned that, referenced that here. Without bringing everybody back to the table, the pandemic, while was a horrific experience for our country, but what it did is it did pull back and expose the fractures that have maybe just been patched over time. And so I'm going to look at y'all, and Dr. Allgood, Debbie, Licia, Jennifer, jump in. Where do we begin to continue to repair the fractures? And we've had unprecedented money. Go ahead.
I would like to say, although those programs serving middle and upper income families suffered greatest initially during the pandemic, Department of Human Services through Chad and under his leadership made the Child Care Strong funding available to all programs. And let me tell you, Mark, it was life changing. Listen, we were struggling before the pandemic hit. This country has built an invisible infrastructure that has been funded by private out-of-pocket funding with a 1% profit margin, which leaves you no wiggle room. And it's what we've realized is we can't expect the market to carry the child care or stabilize the child care program. With the Child Care Strong and in the manner in which Mississippi administrated that program. By the way, I have to say this, Mississippi was ranked 3rd throughout the country for its administration of Child Care Strong. And let me tell you, we feel it and we saw it and we benefited from that. But it was life-changing, and it went to all programs. So when we're speaking about the state of childcare, we're not just talking about those who serve low-income children.
Yeah.
We're talking about those who serve upper-income families, those who serve middle income, those who serve low income. We're talking about all programs. We've got to bring the entire industry together to coordinate services in order to have the greatest impact in Mississippi that we can have, and the greatest impact in workforce development. Wouldn't it be great if everywhere we went, whether it were family child care home, a licensed center, a church program, wouldn't it be great if they all offered the same learning environment, warm a learning environment and caring environment that you would want to have for your children and grandchildren? If we can please the grandmothers, we'll be in good shape.
So you brought up a good point. Lisa, Jennifer, jump in here. About a 1% operating margin, which means possibly one child, you lose one child or the inability to serve a child in a day, you're starting to dip into your own pockets. Mm-hmm. That's not a strong business model that can be sustained over time. But if childcare ceases to exist in a community, especially one that is beginning to try to come out of the reaches with population decline, or one with significant population growth or economic development investment, if a center can't operate and you begin to lose capacity, you lose profitability with the same overhead. And I'm going to start over here with Jennifer. You're in a part of the state that is seeing some stable, 1 to 2% population growth every year, and has a partially agrarian, but also industrial economy. So what happens to your profitability if a business closes or you just can't operate?
We'll be in a financial bind. You need that support to the point where, they start dropping, you have to start laying off staff. And then when you have to either kind of like with me, I try not to have my staff, the child teacher ratio at the top. But when you start losing, you're gonna have to push it up to that max. I get, so when you can spread them out a little bit, it helps. But yes, it would most definitely go into the profit part of it when you have to kind of like back those children up and have a full classroom to that capacity. It hurts.
And you bring that, you've created a business model that is not at that full ratio. And I noticed that Debbie and Licia were nodding as well. But again, that cuts into your profitability, and you still have a family and a house to outfit and a family to feed, which proves to me you ladies are not in this to get rich.
No. And you don't want that full capacity to classroom. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. I don't want that full capacity to classroom if I can make it work. Because just like we were saying earlier, if you have somebody out, you have to juggle those kids. You never know when somebody might call in that morning at 6 o'clock and say, hey, I'm not going to make it. So I always try to leave a little wiggle room there, or try to have a floater or a part-time person or something that can cover that. And I always try to tell my staff, hey, if I know you're going to be off, that's fine. And when we know, we kind of like know how we have to juggle to make it work. So in case licensure or somebody comes in. But when you have full capacity to the classroom, I don't see the full quality there. It's mainly what you're trying to do is just make sure those kids are kept safe and do. But when you have a little bit wiggle room there, you have a little bit more quality there. And that's what I try to do. But like I say, it get rough when it start dropping off, when you start losing kids. But we just have to work with it. And then also, as a director, you have to wear many hats. You just never know. I might have to go in the classroom. I might have to go in the kitchen. We just do what we have to do to make it.
Lisa, I see you nodding your head in affirmation. One of the things that we've also seen, you and I being from the same town, we worked through the announcement of 2,500 jobs coming to our city. And if I don't recall, you may have darkened my door to tell me I needed to get to the policymakers that were involved in that project, saying we've got to have some incentives for childcare providers to actually start centers and increase capacity, or increase. At that point, it felt numb to me, but Jennifer just kind of opened up my eyes to make sure that they keep available capacity, but also have not hit the max ratio so that you can have that higher quality. So from not only keeping a workforce going for today, when you announce large economic development projects, or just to grow a small business, it can impact you.
Absolutely. I want to touch back on the pandemic that we talked through a little earlier. And I think this is true for childcare. It doesn't matter what part of the state you're in. But we had so much funding support, from the Paycheck Protection Program to the supports that MDHS gave us to help keep us operational. But those funds had to be used to increase the pay to our staff, because we were competing with them being able to stay at home and draw a check. And I needed to be able to compensate them for coming to work and risking exposure to COVID that we basically knew nothing about at the time. And so with all the funding that was pumped in the system during those years, we were able to stabilize our teacher pay rates to a much higher level than what we were pre-COVID, which they very definitely deserve. And quite frankly, they deserve much, much more than what I'm able to pay them now. What we also learned with that is, with the higher rates of pay, we were able to retain staff for longer periods of time, which gave us an opportunity to train them in best practices and what quality looks like. And we were able to develop those training modules to grow our staff along, because we were keeping them for more than 3 months or 4 months, and then they're out the door to go work at McDonald's. The issue now, though, is that our tuition cannot support the pay rates that we had to pay during COVID. And I can't keep my staff if I cut their pay. So we have had to seek alternate streams of revenue for myself and my brother. We're the owners, to be able to sustain and keep our business operational. So we are doing this business because we love it, and we love our children, and we love our families, and we love the support that we're able to provide our community. But again, I think Debbie and Jennifer both have said none of us are doing this because we're making money. We're doing it because we recognize the importance of the role that we play in the lives of these children and families.
Art, I
So-
want to speak to the funding
Yes.
really quickly, because I think it's important for folks that don't, dwell in this world to understand. So our regular funding that we provide, certificates, reimbursement, those are not adequate to really provide for what our child care providers need to cover their costs. When we got the relief money, so the Child Care Strong grant that Debbie, Alicia, and Jennifer have spoken to, the money that we got there was triple what we typically get in a normal federal allocation year. And when we set the amount of money that our child care partners were going to receive with the Child Care Strong grant, we didn't use a tuition reimbursement model because we knew that that was not going to be sufficient. The purpose of those Child Care Strong grants was to sustain our child care partners during the pandemic. And so we used a cost of quality model to establish how much our providers would be getting. And we finally were able to see what happens if we fund our child care programs at a level that they need to meet their basic needs. Nobody got rich off the Child Care Strong grants, but our child care providers were finally able to invest back in their buildings. Some of our child care providers, they're just doing the best they can with what they've got. And some of them, they're in old homes that need things like just, new plumbing or even new siding or, new ceilings. Just basic, just basic physical facility things. And we have seen just an uptick in what our child care partners have been able to do. But again, it comes down to funding. But I think it's not just childcare folks. We're not just holding our hands out and say, hey, give us the money. We're saying, look, if you give us the funding, this is what we can do with it. Nobody here has any intentions of using money for other than what's going to be best for the children that we're caring for and educating. And I think our child care providers, they're not greedy. They're just being realistic. They're just saying, listen, for us to be able to care for our most precious resource, our children, which are the literal future of our state, of our nation, of our world, this is what we need. And they are being very realistic and, in my opinion, very conservative with what they're saying that they need to make that happen.
So essentially, we're seeing several, not just one issue. It's kind of a myriad that the fracture is there not only from how childcare is governed or the oversight of it, but also just the business model itself was laid open, and it shows that if we're going to repair the fracture, the first thing we got to realize is that we can't go back. There's no ability to go back. The workforce is still not meeting in terms of pay. It's still not competitive. You mentioned, Alicia, somebody could leave you and go to work at McDonald's. That's a challenge because you have to spend all that time training and equipping and investing in their lives before they even are able to invest in the life of a child and a family in your community. we'll bring this up from the previous podcast. Roughly 70%, Chad, I believe, of childcare providers in Mississippi, no matter who they served, had to close during the pandemic for either temporary or full time. Had that money not been there and been there in a quickly distributed way, we may not have an industry today. But that highlights that if we don't continually the prioritization of this, we may not have an industry tomorrow. And I'll just leave that open for y'all to go at.
Well, we would have been wiped out, particularly those who don't serve low-income children, just completely wiped out. And now this money that has kept us afloat and actually stabilized us and allowed us to offer the services that the parents need and that the children need will be it will be gone as of September 30th. And so we'll be going right back where we were. And we know we can't keep going right back. Do you remember when the days when you used to be able to pile all the children in the back of a station wagon and ride all over town singing to Elvis Presley with the windows down, whatever? We know we can't do that now because we know that seatbelts save lives. We know we can't go back and act as though the quality incentives don't matter and act as though a fractured industry will not harm us, because it will harm us. And particularly in a low income area. Now I have something I'd like to share with you from the U.S. Treasury. They recently released a report. Well, it's actually 2021, but this is what their findings were. Available, affordable, and high quality childcare provides benefits to children, their parents, and the economy at large. First, consider the benefits of childcare for children. Research documents that children who attend high quality early learning programs relative to similar children who cannot attend such programs perform better on grade school tests, stay in school longer, experience lower rates of depression, have better physical health, and have higher individual and household earnings as adults. Now, knowing that, we need to begin to move forward. As you said, not go back, move forward. As this money expires, through the pandemic money expires, we need to have our legislators consider stepping in and helping us where they can. The biggest help would be with wages, and not for me, but for my employees. We cannot go back to ignoring childcare. We cannot act as though it's a partisan issue, a parental issue. It is a workforce development issue.
Lisa, Jennifer, would you like to add on to that? I see some nods of affirmation.
Yes, I totally agree. Just like even with the stipend that the teachers is getting now, that has been very helpful to them. Now it's fixing to come to an end. Any help that the state can give us for a salary, it is greatly needed, because most of them are just getting paid that rarely above minimum wage at my site, $10, $11 an hour.
And it should be for all programs. And the way that we take this fractured industry and become one, I think will probably be at some point in time through licensing. That's the one thing that we all have in common, that we all must cooperate with. And so this should be available to all programs. But it must be done. If it's not done, Mississippi is going to have a problem.
I think we've shown that, and I think we've shown that it can be done. We developed the infrastructure to make it happen. And one thing that policymakers say when we talk about investing in early childhood, they'll say it's not the state's job to subsidize private business. We're not talking about subsidizing private business. We're talking about investing in early childhood education. I agree. I think wages, that's the first place that we need help there. But what policymakers have to understand is, by providing that investment, you're not subsidizing the business. What you're doing is you're investing in an industry that supports today's workforce. And by helping our childcare providers with the wage issue, you're keeping the cost of childcare to a level that's affordable. Because if our childcare partners, if they were to pay their teachers what they're worth, no parent could afford it. And if parents can't afford childcare, they can't go to work. And so again, you're not talking about subsidizing private businesses and putting money in childcare owners' hands. You're talking about just simply giving them the financial resources that they need so that we can sustain childcare, so we can continue to provide that workforce support to all working families. You know, Debbie, you said everyone coming together, what's good for childcare, it's good for workforce. It's absolutely true. I couldn't say, I mean, I don't think anybody could say that better. If we invest in childcare, everybody wins. It's a win for everybody across the board.
We had
And Chad, the wages money would not be coming into my business.
Right.
No.
It
Right.
would be going into individual caregivers working with the children on the ground every day.
Right.
And the one thing, the direct incentive has shown that y'all can do that. You can reward our employees without going through us. All we do is verify employment. Excuse me, Lisa.
No, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, Debbie. I just wanted to share a story. We had a family reach out to us that was from Florida. One of the parents had been offered a position at Mississippi College here in Clinton, and she wanted to know that she could obtain quality childcare for her children before she would even entertain the idea of accepting that job. She didn't, she called us to see what we could do to get them in, and it was a process. And she didn't ask us at that point how much our grocery tax was or how much our car tax cost. She didn't ask us how much our tuition was. What she wanted was to know that she had access to a quality program for her children. And then when she was able to solidify that, she accepted the job. And now that family has relocated to Mississippi. And I share that story to say childcare is what feeds the workforce. And if we want workforce participation in Mississippi to increase, we have got to be able to provide affordable, accessible, quality care. And it's got to be affordable for our middle-class families.
Yep.
We cannot charge enough tuition. We can't operate, and like Dr. Allgood has said, we can't operate quality on relying solely on the funding that MDHS is able to provide. And we can't charge enough tuition for private pay families to keep the doors open, honestly.
And
Lisa,
we can't support the program just on what those who do pay private out of pocket, who don't qualify as low income, they cannot pay
No.
what we would need to have to stabilize childcare.
So I'll give you an example. 4 kids all went to some form of childcare. No more than 2 in childcare at a time. Because if we would have had, they were perfectly spaced out, but if we would have had to put a 3rd child in childcare, it was more advantageous for my wife, who's a 1st grade teacher, to stay out of the workforce, which means that's 1 less employed person, which means we would not have been able to afford our housing situation as it was. So there's a teetering edge that was created there. And I promise you, the day that a child would graduate out of childcare and go to kindergarten, we thought we were getting a pay raise in our house. And then another one of our cabooses would come along. And what it shows is this is not a national issue. It's not a state issue. It is a local economy issue of keeping families in the workforce and preparing children to stay in Mississippi as trained workforce. It's a long-term, short-term, but it really comes down to every community, not just the state policymakers and federal policymakers, but local policymakers being involved in the solution and being aware that there may be a problem in their community as well.
And we have to build the talent pipeline, those to staff the programs, and we have to produce the kinds of outcomes for our children to carry on in the next generation with workforce development and to fill those jobs that will be needed in Mississippi at that time.
So we're coming up on about 40 minutes, and this discussion has pretty much stayed on the issues and challenges and opportunities facing us. We're going to segue, because we brought it up, that we're creating the workforce of tomorrow. And I'm going to go to a question about how important is collaboration and quality support in the childcare industry to K-12 success. Chad and I talked about that in our first episode, but what you guys are doing, because the profit margins are so thin, but your operations are so critical to actually helping school districts and communities succeed. And we see that in levels that are Debbie, as you brought up, this is not a low poverty or an upper, or it's a middle class. It's everybody involved and is affected by the unavailability or the availability of quality childcare. And so I'll start over with Chad, and then we'll move to Debbie, Lisa, and then Jennifer.
So, again, research clearly shows, and I'm not talking about people just going and sitting and observing children in a class, in an early childhood classroom. We're talking about brain science. We're talking about the mapping of brains. We're talking about, looking at how brains develop. The first 5 years of a child's life, or of a human being's life, are the most critical in terms of learning and setting them up for success. And I'm not going to say much more other than we cannot ignore how important those first 5 years of a child's life are at setting up their trajectory as they move on into their kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, middle school, high school, and then on into adulthood.
I'll turn that back over to our experts. How does your work impact your school districts?
Well, I just want I just think of it this way. How many communities are connected by Interstate 55? Interstate 55 was built by federal dollars, maintained by state dollars. But if we did not have that interstate, how fractured would we be, and how far could we travel? Well, we cannot continue to operate childcare without an interstate.
It's a strong analogy. I see some more head nodding with affirmation. Jennifer, jump in.
My support with the school district is like talking about like the K through 12 is being able to be partners with them and kind of like work on the levels with the children, because those children is feeding into those public schools. So I'm at a point where situation where the school district actually work with us. When we see something, we reach out to them with the child find and say, hey, let's see what we can do or where we can start, with this child here. And especially with the 4-year-olds, we work to the point where if we need to start a tier level, we give them, resources and data, what we have collected off the child. And they would say, okay, well, let's start this process of where we can, go where we headed with this child. And also bringing the parent in, and the parent is knowing, and we, all together and making a smooth transition into the public school. So they've been very helpful on that end with us.
Lisa?
We also work very closely with our public schools. Fortunately, where we're located, it's just one public school system that we feed into. And we do have very strong collaboration within the schools. We love to hire our public school teachers to work for us during the summer. That helps our pre-K kiddos really get ready for kindergarten. And it also emotionally supports them in that transition, because they're learning in an environment that they're already familiar with. another person that they can trust and that they can have a relationship with. And when they go to that big school, they already feel connected to some of the people that are there. During COVID, we worked very closely with the school to support the virtual learning. We basically had the iPads and our teachers were helping the children do the lessons virtually for full day schools. So we've worked very closely with them. Pre-COVID, we did a survey at the beginning of the school year with all of the kindergarten teachers who had children that had come from our preschool program. And we were able to use the data that we collected in those surveys annually to adjust and adapt our program so that our children are as most prepared as possible to leave us and go into the public school setting and be successful.
What I think cannot be missed here is that it's a community-based problem that requires grassroots, community, state, and federal collaboration to solve a problem. We've identified it. We've seen that there are certain models that have been instituted in Mississippi by the Division of Early Childhood Care and Development and other advocates. Let's not leave MDE out. They're a strong partner within the child care space, as well as the State Department of Health and other collaboratives. No one can do this alone. And just by showing that 3 of you have joined us here today, it's critical to understand that we cannot isolate childcare into a vacuum any longer. It's got to be brought out as an economic development, a workforce, and a educational growth perspective. So I'm going to leave y'all to say final words and anything that we left out to highlight the need of and importance of childcare in Mississippi, and again, emphasize what we need to do to go forward to make Mississippi what we know it can be and even better than it is right now. I'll start over here with Jennifer and move to Alicia, Debbie, and then Chad to close us out.
Help support our staff with salaries. Any support that the state can give to for our teachers so we can lessen the turnover and maintain quality staff. Once we get them trained, they go through all this training, they get all this behind them, and then when they find something that pays a little bit more, they're out the door. But if we can just get some assistance from the state to help maintain staff, that would be awesome.
Alicia, the floor is yours.
I exactly 100% agree with what Ms. Calvert just said. We've got to be able to pay our staff. But I think there are so many facets that are equally important. We've got to be able to maintain our facilities. We've got to be able to provide materials in classrooms that engage and grow children's minds. And using those materials 11 hours a day by multiple children, they have to be replenished and they are very, very costly. So I mean, we need some financial support to stabilize the industry as a whole so that we can focus on what we do best, which is growing children.
Debbie?
Well, I am happy to have been serving in childcare during a time when leadership at the Department of Human Services is the best it's ever been with regard to expertise and support. I'm happy that I was in childcare during the pandemic because the pandemic echoed what we've been saying all along. This is what we need in order to provide the right kind of care for these children and to invest in the future. And so I'm just saying that although this money will be gone as of September 30th, we need to pick up from there and continue to move forward. We know what the possibilities are with the right kind of support. We're not asking for our legislator to provide us with the same funding that Child Care Strong provided, unless they want to. We certainly wouldn't turn it down. But we are asking that they consider supporting wages through the Mississippi Lottery or other programs in order to at least allow us to compete with McDonald's when hiring staff. Mississippi now has the lowest work participation rate in the nation. We can change that with the right supports and the right attitudes. We need to move forward.
Dr.
I'm
Allgood,
excited about it.
I'm excited to hear the passion. Dr. Allgood, two things that have been brought up is part of the incentive program and also resource and referral. It's expensive to not only staff, but also outfit and maintain buildings, but also having those experiential toys that create that learning environment. So Chad, if you don't mind closing that out and probably touching on those things, but knowing we'll probably have to come back with another episode.
So we say our working families are our clients, but our child care providers are our partners.
Yes.
We couldn't do what we do without folks like Debbie, Licia, Jennifer, and all the other child care providers and their staff across the state. We do have things that we have done with our funding that support these programs, but it's not enough. And I think if I could just leave anyone who's watching this, I hope that we've listened to the stories of everyone here today to realize that we can't go back. Childcare is critical. We can't go back to where we were. And we have to stop pointing fingers at other people to solve the problem. This is a situation. The situation is this. Childcare is something that impacts everybody because everyone is connected to a child in some way. And we have to stop pointing fingers at other people and say, well, this is your issue to solve. This is not my problem. Guess what? It is. It's everyone's issue. It's everyone's problem. It's everyone's responsibility, in my opinion, to look toward the future. What do we need to do now to make sure that the future of this state, of this nation, of this planet is brighter? And we have to start with our children, who are our future. And I'm going to quote the late Dr. Louise Davis when she said, "If not you, then who? If not us, then who?"
Powerful words to close us out. Powerful topic for this state to begin to consider in all seriousness. I thank you each for joining us today on Connecting Hope. And I hope our conversation does just that. It connects children, parents, providers, and our state to a future that is filled with hope. Again, thank you. And may God bless us in our service to our communities.